share. Okay, is everybody able to see my screen? Okay. Are you able to see the screen?
Not yet. Jenny, maybe to stop share first. Yeah, now we see it.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much, Womeg, for having me today in the morning. I'm really excited and a little bit nervous to share my story and my journey. But, you know, I really want to keep this as an open platform. You know, please ask me any questions that you have, you know, when we go into the Q&A. So I'm just going to launch right into it. Now, if you kind of look at my face and like, oh, this person seems kind of familiar, you know, where have I seen this person before? That's probably because, you know, maybe if you watched a lot of television, like in 2005, you would have seen me on Singapore Idol. Yeah, I get a lot of strange looks from people in the MRT train sometimes. And is this a long lost relative, or is this somebody that I've seen on, like, you know, comedy shows? So that was my life for a very long time. I was a TV producer at MediaCorp. I was behind the camera, I was in front of it as well. I used to write scripts for all kinds of shows, anything from a hard-hitting current affairs story all the way up to the news and, like, you know, comedy shows. Of course, I was also a singer. So on top of my corporate jobs that I held with MediaCorp and StarHub and DBS, I would also be singing at all of the pubs and clubs around Singapore, anything from heavy metal to jazz to R&B to pop. You know, so I think this was the life that I had. And if I had 1 or 2 minutes spare on the weekends, I would be paddling, I would be dragon boating, or, you know, I used to be a dragon boat coach, a newbies coach for the German Dragons Singapore. And I also used to, you know, paddle outrigger and represent Singapore in overseas races. So, you know, kind of now when I'm talking about it, I'm like, geez, lady, you did a lot of things. How do you even have time to sleep? Yeah, it probably shows, like, I can see how tired I look in some of these photos. But, you know, that's what I enjoyed about my life. You know, I was just doing 101 different things at the same time. And, you know, this was also another aspect of my life that I really enjoyed, you know, going off and paddling in overseas races, these beautiful beaches. I mean, we were in 2015 on this gorgeous island of Boracay in the Philippines. As you can see, I have about 120 of my fellow teammates there that make up the Singapore Barbarians. We had a great time, you know, swimming, paddling, dancing in the sea. I mean, the moment that you land in Boracay, you're just like, ah, yeah, the year has finally begun. As you can see, we won a lot of medals, but, you know, this whole paradise kind of took a different turn when I arrived back in Singapore and I was in the hospital for 2 to 3 days. And I didn't understand why. My entire system had just shut down. I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't keep anything in. Following this, like at least about like a week or two after that, I started to develop these white spots. Right now I'm wearing makeup, but underneath the makeup, I've got a white nose and white ears. You know, and I was basically like, okay, what's going on here? Maybe I'm just tired, or it's just, you know, just a bad reaction to the water. Following this, I actually developed a couple of autoimmune conditions, Sjogren's syndrome, you know, as well as muscle spasms. I, you know, kind of woke up in the morning with my fingers like this and my toes like this. I had difficulty walking. I lost my voice for 6 months. My hair turned all white. And I was like, okay, if this is a midlife crisis, this is a midlife crisis from hell, right? What is going on over here with my body? And when I look at this picture, you know, like a lot of that takes a new meaning, because in 2018, a friend of mine sent me this article and she was like, Mathilda, did you know that they're closing down the island of Boracay? And I'm like, closing the island down? Who closes an island down? And she said, well, they found out that they were pumping raw sewage and all of the waste, untreated waste, into the touristic beaches. And I was just in shock, right? I was like, this cannot be happening. We were swimming in that. I mean, everything, paddling, diving, dancing. And I was just exposed to that for 3 days. How could 3 days of exposure make me so sick? And this is also something that, like, when you look at all of that green stuff, that's basically an algae bloom. And, all of that excess nutrient was actually causing, this massive amount of macroalgae bloom to happen. And, this was actually something that required the entire island, the, defense forces and everything to come in and clean up. But how do you clean the sea, right? It's like so massive. I mean, we all know how we polluted the sea because each of us and our activities definitely did that. But how do you clean that stuff up? And I mean, as I went soul searching, I was very upset about what had happened to me. I was like, okay, this is not fair. But after I finished with that pity party, I realized that, a lot of my friends who are dragon boaters, who are lifeguards, who are also, on living and working on the island, they tell me that their kids have this white spot. Do they have what you have, Mathilda? And, I mean, this image, right, of children, this doesn't just have to be an image of children in Boracay in the Philippines or in Indonesia or Thailand. Just 2 weeks ago, this is almost an exact image of how I saw children in Pasir Ris playing in the sea. And I ask myself, how is this normal? This is not how I grew up as a child. This is not something that, I think any child should have to grow up with. This is not something that should be just accepted as the state of affairs. And it is what it is, especially in Asian waters. We don't just have plastic pollution, we also have microplastics and a whole lot of other chemicals in there. And eventually, all of this is going to find its way back to us. And so, in this journey of trying to find myself or find some sense of purpose, I didn't have like an Oprah aha moment, right? Where like one day she wakes up and then, the whole plan is there. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. And it's like, this phase, this phase, this phase, and it's all mapped out. It didn't happen that way. I enjoyed and absolutely loved paddling, but I couldn't paddle with a team because when I have a spasm, I would drop my paddle and it would just kind of throw everybody off because they have this expectation of me with that perfection and excellence and preciseness, and I'm always trying to make sure everybody keeps that together. And when it's me that's dropping a ball, it's embarrassing. And so I used to go out paddling on a stand-up paddleboard in my hometown in Pasir Ris. So I live somewhere around here. And I would take my board and I would just kind of go paddling up and down. And as I was paddling in my little stretch of the beach in Pasir Ris, I realized that I live in a fantastic town. The entire town of Pasir Ris is just kind of parallel to the beautiful Pasir Ris beach. And if you look, you have all of these fish farms that, are kind of like hugging the coastline. You have these beautiful parks, you have these wetlands, we're so close to Malaysia. I mean, this is paradise, right? This is what people pay top dollar for, isn't it? Now, how do I kind of take what I see in my paradise town? And believe me, we've been seeing a lot of plastic pollution. Like I said, this was the condition of the water just about 2 weeks ago. This is stuff that we see all the time in Pasir Ris when we do our beach cleanups. How do I take things like this? This was on 26th of March. It's like a mysterious teh tarik that was just washing on the top of the water. When you're paddling in this, and when you've gone through autoimmune issues brought about by polluted oceans, you start to think twice, right, about this the right path for me? I'm going to fall sick, definitely, like, if I touch this. And true enough, some of my staff actually developed like skin irritation when they were trying to scoop this out and, and observe it. If I look at my little hometown, I have to ask this question of, before I want to find a purpose and change the world, what do I do in my little neck of the woods? How do I prevent, these, which the fishermen actually said that this is probably a dead algae, the dead algae bloom that just kind of like, rose to the surface. Or how do I prevent this from happening and from kind of messing up my own little beach? And so this is also where that turning point occurred. While I was on my stand-up paddle board and while I was observing, the nature in Pasir Ris, while I was observing everything that was growing there, that's alva lactuca that kind of gets stuck in my hair. When I paddle, it just kind of, it kind of looks like my hair anyway. I also realized that how do I bring on board all of the experiences of my life? All the times that, I've had to speak to kings or dignitaries or ministers and to big CEOs, and all the times I've had to interview superstars, or all the times that I've had to be the head of social media community and think about how you create behavior change levers. How do I bring all of that stuff together with my own illnesses, my own sense of irritation and frustration and need to do something, but also what I'm observing in my natural ecosystem? And that's really where Ocean Purpose Project came about. I'm naturally a person that is very impatient. If I kind of hear somebody waffling, right, I'm like, let's get to the point. Let's solve this. Why don't we just go from point A to point B? Why do we need to do all of that? And this is where I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave a fantastic, stable job in the financial sector. I still kick myself about that till today. I'm going to start a social enterprise in 2020. And 2020 is going to be the year, right, for sustainability. And of course, on the day that we were incorporated, about 2 weeks after that, the whole world went into a global lockdown, like shut down. And so I was like, okay, I just started a company about ocean conservation, and I'm not even allowed to go outside of my house or even go onto the sands of the beach. Like, how are we going to do this? But really what Ocean Purpose Project is to say, how do we create small little projects that are able to hack the current problems that we face in ocean pollution and figure out how we can drive mass scale adoption, not just to clean up, not just to promote ocean conservation, but to solution engineer. This is only something that can take place when everybody comes together. In my town, that means the ministers, the MPs, that means the community leaders, the religious groups, the schools, the kids, the preschoolers, the ama and appas, right, that are walking around in the mornings, for their morning walks. It's bringing everybody together to solution engineer and create their own ocean purpose project. And we do that through 3 pillars. I mean, if you kind of look at all the problems surrounding ocean pollution right now and distill it in my lens or based on my capabilities, this is how I've decided to segment this. Of course, there might be other ways to tackle this, but in terms of how I want to take a different view of the problem, we've segmented it into 3 categories. The first being plastic to fuel, answering a very simple question, which is, if plastic comes from oil, why don't we turn it back into oil again? Or why don't we rethink how we can use this resource, which nobody wants to tap and everybody doesn't want to have any sense of ownership on? The second pillar is really about saying, in terms of bioremediation, how do we clean our seas at scale? How do we clean all that chemical stuff at a low tech, low cost way, but also create an alternative biodegradable plastic? The third aspect is actually the most difficult. How do we change behavior? Not just using a fancy Instagram story, but really digging deep into experiences and habits of people, especially in Asia, and understanding what makes them tick in order for them to drive action. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with our first pillar. And this is really something where, when I found out about Boracay, I went into this beach cleanup mode, right? Where I joined so many different NGOs on beach cleanups. And the question me and many other participants always had when we did a beach cleanup was, where's all that stuff going? First of all, how did it get here? Who's throwing all of this rubbish, right, into the sea? Number one. Number two, where's it going? What are we going to do with it? And this is really where this question comes in, right? How do we deep dive into plastics and find an alternative reality for it? And really, this is where in 2019, while I was working at DBS, I was really, really very thankful to have the blessing of my bosses to go off and do this little side project where me, the Singapore Idol TV producer person, social media person, and a Pilates teacher in 6 months were able to create a plastic to fuel solution. And you can actually see that horrible, ugly machine that was built with $10,000, right? That's what you get. But really what this project proved was within 6 months from us coming up with this crazy idea in January to deploying this in July, just about 2 days before my birthday, it proved that in a poor island that has no infrastructure for waste collection, except for them having to pay the government to come and bring a barge and take all of that waste. In a poor island that is inundated with 2 to 3 meters of plastic, how do you get somebody a poor islander who has to put food on the table, make sure his children are educated, have lights on, have the fridge working? How do you tell this person that caring for the environment and plastic pollution is an issue? The only thing that will really reach out to them is if we said, we need to mobilize all 3,000 of you to make sure that all that plastic can be converted into a form of free fuel or low sulfur fuel for you. That's where everybody sat up and listened. Now, the beauty of this also is that, they have beautiful beaches, but they were just covered in plastic waste, and no developer wanted to come and actually participate or even purchase some of the pieces of land or develop some of that area. With this project, they were able to clean at least the northeast corner of the island. And that's where government also realized that the community, together with the technology, were able to go off and create plastic to fuel. Now, there's a problem with this as well. We, as a bunch of NGOs and well-meaning people, cannot be creating a plastic solution that converts ocean plastics into fuel that is stored in a PET bottle, right? I mean, anybody who works in any of the petrochems or in health and safety will be like, if there's an accident, I mean, very nice rattan wall that you've weaved here, but all that is going to go up in flames. And this is also where, I felt that, okay, as NGOs, we also need to understand what we're proposing. If we're talking about a plastic to fuel solution, this is a petrochem solution. We need advice from the petrochemical sector. It sounds very counterintuitive, right? But this is also why I felt that I wanted to understand what does it mean for a petrochemical and all of the regulatory standards, certifications, and clearances in order to push such a project forward. And this was why we were one of the first social enterprises to be mentored under the Shell Startup Engine. And I wanted, more than anything, not just the millions of a petrochem for a marketing project or just kind of make my idea come to life. I wanted access to their engineers. I wanted their engineers to come and tear my solution apart and say, Mathilda, this is what's wrong with it. You need to think about this and this and this. How is the syngas going to be reallocated? What about gas emissions? How do we really take this to the level that you will then be able to say, we're not just creating a plastic to fuel solution that just solves ocean plastic, but is able to be deployed over land and sea in a 40-foot container that can shred, that can pyrolyze, that means turn the plastics into fuel and many other products. In fact, it can tweak the kinds of products that you want it to. For example, in Singapore, a lot of the demand seems to be to turn the plastics into hydrogen, which we can definitely do. In fact, in the next 1 hour, I'm going to be giving a press conference with NTU to talk about all of our work with NTU in creating ocean plastic into hydrogen. It can create carbon nanotubes, which is a highly profitable product. But the beauty of this is now you have an NGO that's creating ocean pollution into high profit products that even a petrochem would take on board or offtake because it's of a high value and purity. This is the game change. This is where the money goes to in terms of uplifting a community. Imagine if you have a bunch of islanders and coastal people who have basically been living in polluted waters all their lives, now become the forefront of the plastic to fuel revolution. Now, of course, a lot of this, sounds kind of far-fetched, right? But this is also the work that we are doing every day in Ocean Purpose Project when we do a beach cleanup. And when corporates do a cleanup with us, we actually go off and convert that into hydrogen, into many other kinds of chemicals as well. In fact, this was a project that we did last year together with UNDP Indonesia, where we were tasked with figuring out how we can use the plastic waste from Lombok and then be able to go off and find a use case to turn that into highly profitable products. For example, hydrogen that could be used, I don't know, in a hydrogen e-bike race in the Mandalika MotoGP, just throwing some ideas out there, Again, this is kind of where like our role as an NGO is not to just kind of say plastics are bad. It's to take the next step and say, what do we do with all of that stuff that's out at sea right now? How do we transform that into the most profitable, renewable resource that we can have right now and drive all of the other objectives, tourism, MotoGP, many other aspects of this. So that's our engineer, Richard, holding in his hand rather precariously the hydrogen that's produced from the machine. I said, Richard, you got to take one for the team, man. He's like, it's highly combustible, Mathilda. So I was like, it's okay, Richard. For the picture, you have to sacrifice. So that's him right there. So you can take a look in terms of our numbers right there, in terms of how much we're talking about just for 1 ton of plastic, right, coming out of Mandalika region in Lombok. Okay, let's go to the second part of the story, which I think a lot of you in agriculture are going to really enjoy. Now, the thing that I love about the oceans is that the more that you keep talking about it, and I talk to a lot of students, I talk to a lot of researchers and the PhDs locked in their little labs, I find it amazing that the more we want to learn about our oceans, the more secrets it has to reveal. And, all of this really starts with a very simple thing that occurs every year in my neck of the woods in Pasir Ris. An algae bloom happens here in Pasir Ris, which is caused by an excess of nutrients, not the good type, basically a lot of fertilizers, commercial fertilizers, as well as pesticides that wash into the river systems and then wash into a lot of these water bodies. Now, this is also then creating the perfect system with heat, with additional rainwater. It's creating the perfect system for an algae bloom to occur. And when an algae bloom happens, it severely jeopardizes the aquaculture industry. Not just that, it's also jeopardizing the natural ecosystem of wildlife in the area. And at a worst case scenario, releasing toxins, which is what happened to me. Now, how do I clean the seas, right? It's almost like, that phrase, boiling the seas, right? It's so massive. This is really where Ocean Purpose Project's bioremediation project comes into place, where we are working together with the 60 fish farms in Pasir Ris and eventually the 115 fish farms in the north of Singapore to say, let's use nature's natural tools to clean our seas. Now, what we are doing is growing native species of seaweed and mussels as a curtain around the kelongs or the fish farms of Singapore. And they are basically acting as water filters, absorbing a lot of that excess nutrient and preventing that from going into where the fish are being reared. Now, this can be thought of as a form of integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, also as a form of really kind of helping to maintain the natural biodiversity in this particular part of Pasir Ris. Now, why does this matter? Kelong farmers like our lovely Uncle Heng, who is probably wearing the same shirt, working out there on the waters today, just this year, the algae bloom was so terrible that he bought 20,000 red snapper, put it in his net about 2 days before Chinese New Year reunion dinner, thinking that he could make a big sale, right? Within a day, the fish died. That's a market value of about close to $500,000, before Chinese New Year, which is their boom time to sell. Uncle was so upset, he didn't even want to, do Chinese New Year or celebrate. In fact, after reunion dinner, he just took the boat and went back to sleep in the kelong. And so we came over, we had a party, we tried to lift his spirits, but the situation is quite dire. It's not just about losing the money. It's about seeing all of your work, that you work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., you really give it your all. And watching that amount of fish die, it's when we are there, it's very moving and shocking. What can we do to try and solve this? To buy equipment to filter the seas comes up to tens of millions of dollars. We've crunched the numbers, we know. This is also why seaweed and mussels is a fantastic way to be able to go off and absorb all of that excess nutrient, nitrates, nitrites, phosphates. But what happens to all of that stuff? Now, the seaweed in Pasir Ris is actually growing at a rate of 14% per day, right? Here's another interesting aspect of, the natural green-lipped mussels, which are native species in Pasir Ris, can actually filter between 5 to 10 liters of seawater per hour. Just one mussel, just one. Imagine what a whole line of them do, right? Now, why does this matter? This matters because we can actually already see the results of our seaweed mussel lines, making the areas around our lines less acidic. We're also finding new uses for the seaweed and mussel lines to convert them into things like bioplastics, biofuels, biofuel additives, even fertilizers, right? Now, the beauty of this is that this very infancy stage of our project is already showing us that nature is holding the solution in front of us as the problem is right there. It's about us also taking that step to understand what we're seeing. Now, this is another next stage of where we want to go with this. In Pasir Ris, my vision, which I've been talking about for the past 3 or 4 years, I want the town of Pasir Ris to be using plastic bags that are made out of seaweed and mussels. I want the plastic bags to have the faces of all of our lovely kelong uncles, who are quite lady killer or auntie killer, as I should say. I want our town to understand why this is important. If you paid 20 cents or 30 cents for a seaweed mussel bioplastic bag, you know why? Because you see the impact and you see the face that you are impacting on that packaging. If our town can do this, many other towns around Southeast Asia will be able to do the same. And that's the reason why I want to start in my own hometown, because if I can make this work and if I can get everybody in my town, 140,000 people who live here, to understand why it matters, then we're driving change beyond just something that looks cool on a CNA headline, something that looks fun in a 1-minute Instagram video. We're really getting people to start thinking beyond themselves and working as a community. Coming to community, in the end, it's all about behavior change, right? To change a person's behavior requires us to look at the problem, but also look at the solution that is sometimes in the very same location. And this is really kind of where, the work that I do, or, I've been a TV producer for almost most of my life. I've been, a head of community for a lot of it as well. how do I bring people together? How do I, get people to see things through a different lens? And that's really where we build this online community, from our app to our website to our socials. To me, kind of like, asking questions. What can we do that's a lot more? How do we bring the skill sets of who we are? Maybe some of us are not engineers or environmental scientists. We might be from HR backgrounds or accounting or arts or music. How do we bring that skill set in the way that we think to change the behavior around how sustainability works? And at the end of the day, if you can't do this with your own family, your own friends, and your own neighbors, then you can't do this at all. And so this is really why, like, from my minister, MP, Desmond Tan, who kind of comes out and does cleanups with us, from our wonderful beach cleaners, some of them are touching 70, who do this job Monday to Sunday, to the community, and of course, Uncle Heng. He's looking good there with that white polo shirt. Got to get him one of those, another one of those. I think when we talk to the people that live, work, and play around us, we start to realize that, these are the people that help us to really kind of change and drive change. It has to start with everyone. It doesn't start at all. And so this is also a lot of our work, this is something that I'm really proud to announce. This Zoom background that you see, right, was just something that I picked a beach bar in Pasir Ris, and I stuck a little nice signboard at the side. And for 2 years, I was like, yeah, this is my office. I didn't realize that I was actually manifesting, right, the fact that we will eventually be having, in the next 1 month, a beach office in Pasir Ris. This is the first step towards us being able to conduct research on seaweeds and mussels and partner with universities to also, investigate the plastics that are washing up. Have a nice place where our cleaners can also come and have lim kopi, talk to us, share with us what kind of plastic is washing up, from where, when is it washing up, how does it come up into the beach? All these things require a beachfront office. And of course, you guys are welcome. No shoes, just shorts and beach attire. That's kind of what we're all about. And so, this is also where, I kind of have to ask myself, how do I put all of this together, right? Where do we go from here? And this is also where, with you, it would be great if we can actually get a lot more companies to help us to fund our activities. We don't get grants. We're not funded by grants. We're not funded by a major sponsor. We are funded solely by a lot of our revenue. So, beach cleanups really help us, music live streams. I was a singer, so we might as well make this work for the environment. We did a beautiful music and sustainability and sports live stream last year with UN Denmark, and with, a couple of corporates as well. It was fantastic. Everybody had a great time. We also look beyond our shores, working together with dive agencies and conservation agencies in Bali that are helping to reforest depleted coral waters in the east of Bali, in areas such as Padang Bai. We're also going off and, of course, helping to, through our projects, helping to get the islanders and the villagers in that area of Padang Bai to pivot themselves towards areas such as coral reforestation as a job, as a career, as opposed to maybe working on fishing vessels. Now, some of the other things that we are doing, of course, are our seaweed and mussel lines, where we're going off and, trying to mobilize more of these lines as we move along. We also have water dispensers that we're trying to get for our kelong uncles. Just so you know, all of them drink rainwater. I've had it as well. It ain't too bad. It tastes kind of funky, but, they could do with having, some water filters as well for themselves. And so those just gives you a little bit of ideas in terms of how you can help us as well. So I'm just going to put a pause there and have a sip of coffee. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and let's hear some questions.
Thank you, Mathilda. What an inspiring story, and so enjoyable to hear. And There are so many questions, and I'll jump right into that. The first question that we have is from Singi. Singi, would you like to share it?
Sure. Hi, Matilda. Thanks for sharing. So I used to be an oil and gas analyst, so I've actually read about plastic pyrolysis for quite a bit of time. I'm just wondering how come we haven't seen more large-scale deployments of the technology so far? Is it, a tech issue? Is it because, there's something that you have to do with the feedstock in terms of like sorting it, or, is it kind of like other environmental considerations, like whether it's emissions or any other kind of like byproducts that come out of the process? Thanks.
Great question, Sinyi. I think, this is also part of the question mark. Right now, for the longest time, the solution to plastic has been recycling, mechanical recycling, if I can be specific. Of course, in Europe, this has worked. You might, the level of recycling goes into like, even the color coding of certain kinds of bottles, or, even the types of plastics. The problem in Asia is that plastic recycling in its mechanical form, basically is very low profit. In Singapore alone, most of the plastic recyclers have just said no. So that's one. The second big issue is China has basically said no to importing recycled plastics for recycling. This was basically where like the entire market has gone, head up, because everybody was like, let's just ship all of our plastic waste over to China. They will deal with it. It's kind of also starting to expose the fact that mechanical recycling is definitely going to be difficult, not just for the household plastics that is coming in, but also things like ocean plastic that is heavily contaminated with organic matter and many other kinds of pollutants. Mechanical recyclers just reject that. And the massive amount of plastics that are being pumped into our seas and into our river systems means that all of that stuff either requires a massive amount of investment in facilities to pick, sort, wash, a massive amount of money in terms of fresh water to wash that. I mean, just a month ago, I was hearing from one of the guys up in Tuas who was like, my God, my water bill is insane. And, to pay labor to come and stand and scrub, so this is also part of the issue around mechanical recycling. But the other aspect of it is that it requires a total infrastructure change. Can you imagine having to change like the billion-dollar infrastructure on places like Bukom or Jurong Island to cater for plastic to fuel? Now, the next aspect of this is, in these massive infrastructure, how do you kind of create specialized fractionating processes that allow you to be able to tweak for different products? The problem with ocean plastic is you can't be sure, right? What kind of yield you're going to get. I can't be assured that if I'm maybe using offcuts from a factory or household plastics, I will be able to say I will roughly get, I have this amount of HDPE, LDPE, I'm going to get this amount of hydrogen or this amount of carbon nanotubes. With ocean plastics, it's kind of like, I don't know, the yield changes. Now, of course, this requires a total rethink. For example, until today, in order for you to get a Vera carbon standard for a plastic offset, you could only do that if you were a mechanical recycler of plastic. They didn't account for the chemical recyclers. So this is also why, in terms of systems, we have been actually appealing to Vera and saying, like, we need to account for people like us who are promoting chemical recycling. We need to bring them to the table and really also talk about a full resource recovery. For example, when you drink a bottle of water, it doesn't make sense to me how come the plastic cap is made out of HDPE and the bottle itself is made out of PET. There are two different types of plastics. And these two different types of plastics also need to be recycled in a different way. This doesn't make no sense to me. Shouldn't we be also creating, if we're going to be creating plastic products, they should be optimized for full resource recovery. And I think this is also the mindset that needs to change in terms of sustainability as usual. We talk about business as usual, right? There's also sustainability as usual. We've always only done things this way. We've only recycled in this way, right? We reduce, reuse, recycle. We're not going to think about the repurpose because we kind of like, don't really know the science around that yet. So this is also where we come in to kind of push that conversation, get the engineers involved. The nerds shouldn't be locked in the labs, with the amazing insights, right? We need to kind of pull that stuff out, have conversations around it, and then try to hack how we can do little prototypes that allow us to prove to market that there is a viable solution. The second aspect of this, of course, is, well, everybody was focused on plastic to fuel, and with the fuel price going like this, everybody is like, let's just kind of take the fuel and fuel oil from where we know we're going to get it. With the war between in Ukraine, this has changed the conversation. Renewable energy now becomes something top of mind, and of course, everybody's talking about hydrogen. And one of the things that I find amazing is whenever I say, you can get hydrogen out of ocean plastic, right? That's where I feel like the Lorex, years of me saying, we need to think about plastic to hydrogen, and people going like, this doesn't matter. It's not important right now. And suddenly everybody's like, okay, we need to talk about this. We need to focus it. I think also change of geopolitical climate, economic climate, all of this also helps to facilitate that as well. I hope I answered that, Sydney.
Thank you. Thank you. There's actually a few other questions, so I'll jump right into it. So Susan has a question about whether you'd be interested to speak in a diving expo at ADEX next month.
Oh, 100%. In 2020, I was actually supposed to speak in ADEX, and I was signing on everything, kind of making all of that stuff go. And then we went into lockdown. So I know the ADEX people, John Thet and his gang, great bunch. I'd love to. You can hook us up, Susan. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mathilda. I'm not involved, but absolutely. Let's see what we can do there, because you would be speaking to a very receptive audience there. They'd really appreciate you. I certainly have. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan and Mathilda.
Thank you very much.
Pranav has a question also. I'm sorry, we'll go until 10:25 and then we will close off there. But so this will be probably the last question. Pranav, would you like to share, or would you like me to share?
Oh, whoops. Sorry, Elisa. I have to drop off for another
call. Okay, no worries. Yeah.
But Mathilda, I have your number. I'll hound you another time.
No problem. Thank you, Pranav.
So the question that Pranav had was actually, does OVP work with other similar organizations in Singapore and elsewhere?
So we are working very hand in glove with institutes of higher learning. So for our bioremediation solutions, we work very closely with James Cook University. I'm also the head of sustainability for the Australian Alumni Singapore. So I'm trying to mobilize the 43 Australian universities and any of them that have a very strong marine biology and aquaculture program to get involved with us. For our plastic to fuel, we are basically like tied at the hip with NTU. The NURI division, they've got amazing work that they're working on. In fact, in the next 20 minutes, I'm actually going to be, announcing the work that we've done so far in plastic and hydrogen. We also work very closely with the government agencies in Singapore. That's NEA and parks. We're also looking towards trying to get a little bit closer towards the shipping industry, the aeronautical industry, and really kind of trying to understand how we can bring that together. In terms of our NGO Kaki in Singapore, as we call them, Kakinang, we kind of work closely with SASGAIN. We do a lot of things. We did do a lot of things with ADEX. We work very closely with a lot of migrant worker NGOs as well. That is our CSR as a company. That's what we do. So I think it's also a chance for us to have a chat with the tribe that loves that vibe. I think a lot of what we're doing is very new. We do need, I'm not a scientist. I talk to a lot of people who are. I think it's also about getting people who may not be from that industry, who are from different walks of life. Even though we do plastic to hydrogen, which is in the energy sector or in the waste infrastructure sector, learning from the agricultural sector helps us to also find processes, ways of thinking, systems that can be applied, and vice versa as well. At the end of the day, what I've always kind of been told is that you're doing too many things, you know, can't go do one thing. But since we got a lot of women up in here, right? That's not how the world works. The woman kind of got to do all of this and look after the 2 kids and make sure everybody also, like, you know, is eating, clothed, and like, you know, all the bills is paid and everything is working. So like, you know, we ain't got time to just focus on the one thing. And the same thing happens with ocean pollution. To a farmer like Uncle Heng, you know, you can't tell him that, hey, uncle, we're just going to focus on plastic to hydrogen. Never mind that all the algae bloom is killing all your fish. I will get to that in 5 to 10 years time when the research, you know, and the PDF starts to make a bit more sense. You'll turn around and tell me, I'm losing my business today. You know, the fish that is meant to be on in your supermarket is dying today, right now. What can you do to help me right now? How do you look at the problem that is coming at me from a multifaceted solution? And that's also kind of why, you know, we're trying to do the work that we do. We really do need partners. We need like-minded, driven individuals and companies and you know, even young people or you know, older people, everybody, right? Come in and say, let's get stuck in. Let's work with you. Let's figure out some stuff together. We're very open to partnerships, so please do reach out to us. And if you think, you know, you know a name or you know someone that would really be able to help us move that mission forward, please do get in touch.
Thank you, Mathilda. I personally will get in touch. There's a few things that I like to follow up with you. Hydrogen, nature-based solutions in terms of cleaning up the oceans and food security. All of this, your solution is just covers all the boxes. I will have to start closing, unfortunately. I'd love to hear more, and I encourage everybody to get in touch with you personally. Just one thing, and before we go into the sharing about the next coffee break, I wanted to thank you so much for sharing with us today, and also for your personal sacrifice. I know that, as you said, you know, leaving that corporate job is not an easy thing, and you've inspired all of us, I think.
Do you
Jenny,
want to run the poll?
Yeah, Jenny, would you like to share
the
the last one?
feedback poll. Yeah, I will launch the event feedback poll. And all right, here you go. A quick one.
Just take a few minutes to just complete this before we end. I'm sorry we had to lose a few people during this time.
I'm sorry, I just kind of got excited talking.
No, don't worry. I think for the rest of us, you know, we're just happy that we can hear a little bit more. And I'm really keen to come out one of these days. Mathilda, when do you do your volunteer cleanup? When can people come over? We've
actually got a beach cleanup happening on the 23rd. So if you just kind of check out our socials, we'll put up all the sign up details on that very soon. That's going to be the big one. That's the Earth Day, big shebang in Pasir Ris. So Minister will come. You're going to just yeah, it's going to be fun. Plus also now, you know, with the restrictions easing, everybody's a little bit more, you know, in a gung ho, like, you know, and excited to go back to some kind of normal life again. So yeah, looking forward to eventually bringing some music back to the beach.
Oh yes, I think that would be really wonderful.
Well, maybe we can have a WOMAC contingent at the cleanup as well.
I think that would be great.
Please feel free, ladies. Please feel free.
So then with that, please do remember that our next coffee break is actually on the 5th of May. The speaker will be shared soon on LinkedIn, so please follow us on LinkedIn for the updates. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next WOMAC coffee break. And again, thank you, Mathilda, for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
ladies.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a
Thanks,
fantastic
everybody.
week.
You too.